My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've been a 911 dispatcher for 12 years. And in those 12 years, I thought I'd heard it all. Calls about murders, suicides, horrific accidents. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night of October 3rd, 2023. It was exactly midnight when the phone rang. I know it was exactly midnight because I was looking at the clock, wondering how many hours were left until my shift ended. I answered as I always do, with the calm, professional voice I'd been trained to use. On the other end of the line, there was silence. Not the deadline silence, but a thick, heavy silence, as if someone were holding the receiver, debating whether to speak or not. I could hear faint, shaky breathing. Then the voice came. It was a woman, and she asked a question that completely chilled me. "Can you send an ambulance for someone who's already dead?" I was confused. I asked her what she meant, if she was joking, but she continued in that strange, almost childlike voice. "My husband has been dead in the living room for 3 days, but he's been asking me for an ambulance. He won't stop asking, 'Can you come get him?' My protocol told me to send a police car, not an ambulance, but something in her voice, something in that quiet desperation, made me dispatch Ambulance 47, which was closest to the area. The address was in an isolated part of the city, near the old psychiatric hospital that had been closed in the 1980s. Ambulance 47 was driven by Marcus, a veteran paramedic with 15 years of experience, and his partner was Sarah, a young paramedic who had joined the service only 6 months earlier. I radioed them about the unusual nature of the call, and Marcus responded in his usual calm voice, saying they would be there in 10 minutes. 12 minutes later, Marcus reported that they had arrived at the scene. It was an old 2-story house with peeling paint and a completely neglected yard. All the lights in the house were off except for one on the second floor, which flickered irregularly. Marcus said the front door was ajar. They came in. I could hear everything through the radio Marcus kept open. The sound of their footsteps on the creaking wooden floor, Sarah's heavy breathing, and then that smell. Marcus described it as a smell of decay mixed with something chemical, like formaldehyde. In the living room, they found the body. Marcus confirmed that the man had been dead for at least 3 or 4 days, judging by the stiffness and discoloration. But something was strange. The body was sitting in an armchair, staring at the television, which was off, and in his hands was an old-fashioned corded telephone. Sarah asked where her wife was, the woman who had called. The house was completely silent. Marcus decided they should call the police and get out of there. But when they tried to leave, the front door closed on its own. It didn't slam shut with the wind. It closed slowly, deliberately, and they heard the lock click into place. It was then that the television turned on. There was no image, just static. And in that static, Marcus swore he could see a face forming. A woman's face, her mouth open in a silent scream. Sarah began screaming, begging them to get out of there. They ran to the kitchen, trying the back door. But the house had other plans. The lights began to flicker, all at once, in a rhythmic pattern that sounded like a heartbeat. And then they heard it. Footsteps upstairs, slow, shuffling, coming down the stairs. But they weren't normal footsteps. It was as if something heavy was being dragged up the stairs. Marcus tried to break down the back door while Sarah shone her flashlight down the stairs. And that's when she saw it. A figure coming down the stairs. It wasn't the woman who'd called. It was the dead man from the living room. His eyes were completely white. His mouth hung unnaturally, and he moved impossibly, as if his bones had been broken and reassembled in the wrong order. They finally managed to open the back door and ran to the ambulance. Marcus started the engine and stepped on the accelerator, but the vehicle wouldn't move. The wheels were spinning, but it was as if something was holding the ambulance in place. In the rearview mirror, Marcus saw it. The dead man's figure was standing at the back door, and beside him, the woman had appeared. But she wasn't alive. Her body was transparent, ethereal, and there were deep strangulation marks on her neck. The woman raised her hand and pointed at them, and at that moment, Sarah screamed. There was something inside the ambulance with them. Sitting in the back seat, where the patient normally sat, was a different man. It wasn't the dead man from the house. It was someone older, wearing a blood-stained doctor's gown. His eyes were completely black, and he was smiling in a way no human being should be able to. his mouth opening far beyond what was anatomically possible. The radio crackled, and I heard Marcus's voice, desperate. "Central, there's something here with us. It's not human. I need you." The transmission cut out. For 40 minutes, I tried to re-establish contact. I called other units, the police, the fire department. When they finally reached that street, they found Ambulance 47 abandoned in the middle of the road, 3 blocks from the house. The engine was still running. The doors were open, but Marcus and Sarah were gone. Inside the ambulance, they found only one thing, a recording on Sarah's cell phone. The police showed it to me later, and I wish I'd never seen it. The video showed the ambulance's interior completely dark, and then a light came on. It was that man in a medical gown, holding a flashlight under his own face, and he spoke directly to the camera. They asked a question, the wrong question, and now they will learn the answer where everyone else does, in the silence that follows. Marcus and Sarah were never found. The house at that address was searched. The man's body in the living room was there, but there was no sign of any woman. There never was. Records showed that the man had lived alone for years. And the most disturbing thing, when they reviewed the phone records, they discovered that the midnight call hadn't come from that house. It came from inside Ambulance 47, 3 hours before Marcus and Sarah got there. Second story, the return. 6 months have passed since that night. 6 months in which I thought about quitting every day. 6 months in which I wondered if I should have done something differently, if I should have listened to that instinct that told me there was something deeply wrong with this calling. Ambulance 47 was taken out of service. No one wanted to work on it, and honestly, no one should have. It sat parked in the backyard of the warehouse, covered with a tarp, waiting to eventually be sold for scrap, but no one wanted to buy it. There was something about that vehicle that people could sense, even without knowing its history, a cold presence, a sense that you were being watched. I tried to move on. New paramedics were hired to replace Marcus and Sarah. Life went on. But sometimes, late at night, when the call center was nearly empty, I could still hear it, that low static on the radio, and in it, if you listened closely enough, you could hear voices, whispers, and sometimes, just sometimes, I recognized one of them. It was Sarah repeating over and over, "Don't answer, don't answer, don't answer." But I didn't tell anyone. They thought I was stressed, traumatized. They offered me leave, therapy. I refused, because I knew that if I left that position, something terrible would happen. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. And then came the night of April 3rd, exactly 6 months after the first call. Midnight sharp. The phone rang. My hand shook as I reached for the receiver. Part of me knew, even before I picked up, what was on the other end. I answered with a choked voice. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. That same dense, heavy, impossible silence. And then the voice. But this time it wasn't the woman. It was Marcus. "Do you remember the question they asked?" he said. But it wasn't really his voice. It was something using his voice, like an ill-fitting garment. "Can you send an ambulance for someone who's already dead?" My blood ran cold. I tried to speak, but my throat was closed. Marcus continued. "We found the answer, and now you will too. Ambulance 47 is waiting. It's always been waiting." The call dropped. My hands were shaking violently. I glanced at the other operators in the room, but no one seemed to have noticed anything strange. I checked the system. The call wasn't registered. Officially, it never happened. But I knew it happened, and I knew what I needed to do. I shouldn't have gone to the warehouse. I should have called the police. Someone, anyone. But I knew no one would believe me, and something inside me, something I can't explain, kept pulling me there. It was like I had no choice, like my fate had been sealed that first night, when I sent Marcus and Sarah to that cursed house. The depot was 20 minutes from the call center. I drove there in complete silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of the engine and my own breathing, which seemed thunderous in the stillness of the night. The streets were deserted. It was as if the entire city were asleep or dead, and I was the only living thing moving in that darkness. The warehouse gate was open. It shouldn't have been. There were padlocks, security, alarms, but it was wide open, swaying slightly in the night wind. I got my car in and drove slowly to the back, where I knew Ambulance 47 was parked. And there she was. The tarp had been removed. The ambulance lay completely exposed under the pale moonlight, and all the vehicle's lights were on. The red and blue light swirled on the roof, no sound, just that hypnotic, silent movement. The main beams were on, pointing directly at where I was. I got out of my car. Each step toward that ambulance felt like it weighed a ton. My body screamed at me to run, to flee, to do anything but get closer. But I kept walking. It was as if my feet had a mind of their own. When I got close enough, I saw that the back door was open, ajar, inviting, and from within emanated a pale, sickly green light, pulsing as if it were alive. I could hear something coming from within. It was music. No, not really music. It was like chanting, voices overlapping one another, singing in a language I didn't recognize but that somehow felt ancient, forbidden. I looked inside. The back of the ambulance had been transformed. It no longer looked like the inside of an emergency vehicle. The walls were covered with symbols, drawn in what looked like dried blood. Symbols that hurt to look at, that made my head throb and my vision blur. In the center, where the stretcher would normally be, was what looked like an altar. And on that altar, there were 2 body bags. I knew who was inside them. "You came," a voice said behind me. I spun around quickly. It was the man in the scrubs. But now, up close, I could see better. His face was rotted, patches of skin hanging off, revealing the bone beneath. Those pitch-black eyes stared at me with a hunger that transcended anything human. "Good. We needed you. The ritual requires 3. He advanced, and I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't budge. It was as if invisible roots had grown from the ground and held me in place. The man, that thing, came closer and closer, and I could feel the unnatural chill emanating from him. It wasn't the cold of winter. It was the cold of death, of the absence of life, of the complete negation of existence. "Do you want to know what happened?" he said, his voice echoing as if from a deep well. "Do you want to know why we chose you, your team, this ambulance?" I didn't want to know. God, I didn't want to know. But he continued anyway. "This place," he gestured around, "this warehouse is where the mental hospital morgue used to be. And I worked there. I was the one who took care of the bodies of the patients who died. But I didn't just take care of them. I experimented on them. I tried to find ways to bring back the dead, not out of pity, out of curiosity, for power." He smiled that impossible smile again. "They caught me, eventually, locked me in one of the cells. And there I died, alone, mad, still obsessed with my research. But death wasn't the end. I learned. I learned that there is a space between life and death. And in that space, there is power. Power over those who cross. Power over those who facilitate the crossing. Paramedics," I whispered, understanding. "Exactly," he said. "You who are always on the threshold, always bringing people back or letting them go. You have a connection to that space. And I needed that connection. I needed souls who understood the crossing. 3 souls. The paramedic, and you. The conduit, the one who sends others into the unknown." The truth hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just a witness. I'd been part of the ritual from the beginning. The midnight connection. The dispatch of Ambulance 47. It had all been orchestrated. I'd been manipulated from the first second. "And now," he said, "the ritual is complete. With the 3 souls bound to this ambulance, I can finally cross over. Return. Not as a ghost, but as something more. Something that can walk between worlds. Something that can bring others with me." He placed his rotten hand on my shoulder, and I screamed. Pain exploded through my body. Pain like I'd never felt before. It wasn't physical pain. It was as if my soul was being ripped apart, pulled out of my body one piece at a time. I could see myself from the outside, my body convulsing, my eyes rolling back, and then I was falling through layers of reality, through veils of existence. And then I was in a place that wasn't a place. It was darkness, but not empty. It was full of things moving in the shadows, things that whispered, things that waited. And in the center of this darkness there was a light, a red, pulsing light. like a gigantic heart. Marcus and Sarah were there, but they were no longer themselves. Their bodies were distorted, stretched, transformed into something that seemed vaguely human but fundamentally wrong. They looked at me, and in their eyes, I saw not recognition, but hunger. Hunger for the life they no longer had. "Welcome," the man in the apron said, his voice coming from all directions at once. "Welcome to the place where the dead wait for the ambulance. And now, you three will serve. You will answer the calls that come from midnight, the calls of those who ask the wrong question." And I understood. I finally understood everything. We weren't victims. We were the new collectors, the new drivers of the cursed ambulance. And every time someone asked 911 a question about death, every time someone asked for help for something that was already gone, we would be sent to collect, to bring to this place between worlds. The pain stopped, but I wasn't relieved, because when I looked down, I saw that my body had changed. My hands were translucent, glowing with that sickly green light. And when I looked up, I saw through some non-existent window between worlds, my physical body in the warehouse, empty, dead, lying next to ambulance 47. "The shift starts now," the man laughed, "and lasts forever." And as I stood there, trapped in that impossible place with Marcus and Sarah, as we became part of the cursed ambulance itself, one last thing happened. The 911 phone rang. Somewhere, in reality, in the call center where I used to work, the phone rang at midnight, and a new dispatcher, unaware of anything, answered. "911, what's your emergency?" And a voice, my voice, but not my voice, answered, "Can you send an ambulance for someone who is already dead?" The cycle continued, forever, like the revolving doors of hell, always bringing in new workers, always growing, always spreading. And the question no one should ask keeps getting asked. The question that opens the door. The question that calls ambulance 47. Because now I know the answer. Yes, we can send an ambulance to pick up someone who is already dead. But when she arrives, it's not the dead she'll take. They are the living. And once you're in, once the door closes, you're part of the team. Forever. Traversing between worlds. Answering calls that shouldn't exist. Serving a purpose that shouldn't be served. My name doesn't matter anymore, because I'm not me anymore. I'm just another driver in the ambulance that never stops rolling. In ambulance 47. In the cursed ambulance that responds to calls at midnight. And if you ever, late at night, dial 911 and ask the wrong question, it will be my voice you hear on the other end. And it will be my hand that opens the door when the ambulance arrives. So I have just one request. A single request from someone who learned too late. Never ask if we can send help to someone who has already died. Because we can, and we will. If you enjoyed these 911 horror stories and want access to more exclusive content, complete scripts, and never-before-seen stories, be sure to check out our special ebook in the pinned comments.